I'm just taking a
Okay, and they all have one.
It's a chilly day in May outside the courthouse in Pembroke, Ontario, when Isabel Raycroft arrives, a 76-year-old mother and grandmother, here for the most unlikely of reasons.
And we'll all congregate around Mom.
Purple ribbons all round for each of these volunteers gathered to silently support Isabel and her daughters, who've come to ask the court to lift a publication ban on a criminal trial they fear may stay under wraps.
It's official.
It's official, okay.
Thank you.
It was the one time that a judge specifically said, and I will remind you that there is a publication ban. And it planted the seed that, well, maybe this is something that somebody's trying to hide.
In but 2 hours, it's over. Isabel is now free to tell her story.
That means we won.
A moment of celebration in a journey that's been long, painful, and shines a spotlight on domestic violence in rural Canada.
Effective right now.
She was, for a long time, Isabel St. James, divorcee, single mom at age 27, raising her 3 girls on the family farm in Quebec. Debbie, Janet, and Sharon eventually moved away, married, had families of their own, but their mother never seemed interested in marrying again.
I would say she's happy-go-lucky, high energy.
Independent.
Yeah.
Strong.
I
Smart.
had described her recently as like a mischievous elf.
Yeah, gypsy a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it came as a bit of a surprise when Isabel, age 69 and single more than 40 years, announced she was in love with a retired farmer from Arnprior. Like so many small towns in the Ottawa Valley, Arnprior is a tight-knit community, a place with a county fair and deep-rooted farming traditions. This is where Elmer Raycroft raised his family, became a car salesman, and eventually deputy mayor. In 2009, a year after the death of his wife of 50 years, Elmer met Isabel on an internet dating site.
He said, go on the McNabb Braeside website and you'll see me there on the website, all the committees that he belonged to and that he was deputy mayor.
Was being deputy mayor a big deal to him, to Elmer?
Yes. Yes, I think so.
This is Elmer Raycroft's farm, a modest home upon 100 acres, the home he'd soon share with his new wife. On May 21st, 2011, Elmer and Isabel were married, but soon after, what she calls Elmer's episodes of irrational jealousy began and quickly escalated.
He threw a glass of water in my face. So that was the first time that he just threw something at me.
6 weeks into their marriage, after she alleged Elmer forcibly dumped her out of a chair, Isabel headed for the police, filed a report, and spent 2 nights at a daughter's house.
I should have gone and I should have pressed charges, but I didn't.
Why not?
Because I loved him, because I hoped he said he would change. He cried and I cried. Well, you know how it is.
She later recanted that police report, then stayed quiet for 3 years about the goings-on at the farmhouse. But the conflicts grew more and more violent. She said he threw a mug at her, choked her with a belt, smothered her with a pillow, and in jealous rages would check her for semen, not his own.
And he says, aren't you going to take a shower and get rid of all the sex off you? Well, then, I started to move, but he tried to, he said, I'm going to check you for semen, and he was pulling at my legs, and I screamed, but I was bruised all over where he was pulling at me.
When those kinds of things started to happen, did you tell anyone?
No, I didn't tell anybody.
But in Isabel's marriage, it was getting harder to hide. 3 years in, after Isabel and Elmer's winter stay in Florida, her daughters began to worry that she hadn't called upon her return.
I said, okay, Mom, what's going on? What exactly is going on? Like, you're not well, you haven't come to see us, you've been home for 2 weeks now. You would always be, I know you're sick, but like, what's going on? So she started to cry, I started to cry.
It's okay. I'm not going to cry, so you're not going to cry. Look at me sucking it up. So Sharon spoke to Mom, and Mom told her. And Mom told her, okay, my turn. And Mom told her that Elmer had been abusing her. Sharon takes her car and waits down the road. Okay.
The sisters devised a scheme, convincing Isabel and Elmer to drive to Janet's house, ostensibly so Isabel could care for a grandchild, but really to get their mother alone. Isabel never did return to her husband. Instead, went to the police, and days later, Elmer was charged with 7 counts of assault and sexual assault. The trial lasted 5 days before Justice Jane Wilson. Isabel testified, detailing multiple abuses, including sexual intercourse without her consent. I said, "Don't do anything. I don't want to do anything." Then he proceeded to pull off my pajamas, she told the court. "He raped me, and I walked around the house for days telling him he raped me." Elmer denied all the charges against him, saying any intercourse or intimacy with Isabel was always consensual. When asked if he'd checked her for semen, he said, "That never happened. I did not do that." Elmer suggested Isabel made false accusations because he wouldn't sell his 100-acre farm.
That is not true. There's no truth in that at all, absolutely none. I would have stayed there if Elmer had been normal, but I could no longer live like that. I could no longer live on the edge.
Justice Wilson left no doubt who she believed in her decision. The court rejects his evidence, she wrote, as it relates to the assault with the belt, the choking, the sexual intercourse, the checking for semen, and the sexual assaults in the vehicle. His evidence does not give rise to a reasonable doubt in the court's mind. Justice Wilson found Elmer Raycroft guilty on 6 counts. But then, something unexpected. She fell ill before she could deliver the verdict. Instead, Justice Hugh Fraser read her judgment in court, and the task of sentencing Elmer also fell to him.
Specifics of the actual act.
On the day of sentencing, Janet Mathut sat by her phone waiting for news from her mother and sisters.
You know, his own attorney had asked for 9 months in jail, which I guess was the low end of what he could get. So maybe I would see 9 months in jail. But what I saw was he got off.
In a decision that caught everyone off guard, Justice Fraser declared he'd read the transcripts and he had a reasonable doubt. "Mr. Raycroft," said Justice Fraser, "I'm declaring a mistrial. The guilty verdicts rendered by Justice Wilson have been vacated by me."
You know, I was walking around devastated and
Why?
trying to put it behind me. Well, because I was angry. I was angry at this point. You know, how dare he get away with all that?
What had happened? First things first. When Elmer Raycroft was initially found guilty, he fired his lawyer and hired Ottawa criminal lawyer Rodney Seller.
The trial judge found him to be a plausible witness. And under our criminal law, if there's a reasonable doubt and the Crown must prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, the accused should be acquitted.
Justice Wilson did say Elmer's explanation of one sexual touching incident was, quote, plausible, but rejected his credibility. Justice Fraser focused on that word, concluding, "I cannot proceed to sentence a man whose evidence at trial was considered worthy of belief, credible, and possibly true."
Justice Wilson said Raycroft's version of events is plausible, but then she carries on to say, for reasons enunciated,
I reject that evidence. And I want to just read to you a number of quotes from her decision. His evidence appeared contrived and self-serving. Evidence was weak at best, completely lacking in credibility. Suspicious, disingenuous, and lacks credibility. So my question is, if the trial judge clearly did not believe Elmer Raycroft, why was it right for Justice Fraser to step into Justice Wilson's shoes, take that extraordinary power, and to say that, to overturn the trial judge's decision?
I think where you're confusing it is you're calling it an extraordinary power. The code is very, very clear that if the judge is unable to continue, a second judge must take over. So the power is not extraordinary. It happens quite frequently, and it's exactly what the Parliament of Canada has said should happen in this instance.
It's a really surprising case.
How come?
Well, I've never seen anything like it.
Robin Parker teaches international criminal law in Toronto, has worked as both Crown and Defense Counsel, and says this is one very unusual case.
It's pretty unusual for a judge who's sitting at the same level of court, review all of the same evidence, and then come to a different conclusion and speak it publicly. That was unusual. The second thing about it that was unusual was that the original trial judge in this case, not only did she see days and days of evidence, it was clear that she really wrestled with the evidence. And when she came to conclusions about credibility in the case, she gave specific reasons why she made the findings that she did.
Isabel Raycroft isn't sure how Justice Fraser came to his decision, but she has questions about the day she went to court for Elmer's pre-sentencing to give her victim impact statement.
And as I walked into the courtroom through the little anteroom, I couldn't believe all these people. Debbie was behind me, and I sort of stopped for a minute. These are all people that I knew. Some people I had at my house for dinner. I'd play euchre with them.
It's common when sentencing an offender for defense to submit evidence of good character, and many in Arnprior were willing to go to bat for Elmer. They included Tom Peckett, the current mayor of McNabb Braeside. He'd known Elmer 4 decades and testified Elmer was very passionate about the people that he was working for, and he believed wholeheartedly in his community.
When that happened, we had a really bad feeling that there was a gathering of the old boys to save one of them.
Speaker, it is time that this government...
Another politician also stepped up for Elmer.
...takes all measures to ensure that the children of today grow up in a society that will simply not tolerate any form of abuse or violence against women.
That's MPP John Yakubuski proposing a new law to keep victims of domestic violence safe, just a few weeks after he provided a character reference for Elmer, a convicted sex offender. That too was unusual, given that MPPs have been advised by Ontario's Ethics Commissioner to be cautious offering reference letters in court because, quote, any involvement might be interpreted as an attempt to interfere with and/or influence the legal process.
What's interesting about this case, though, is that the judge heard all of that evidence that wouldn't have been admissible at the trial, right?
The character references.
Right. Before declaring the mistrial.
The mistrial was appealed. That failed. A new trial will begin in 2017. Isabel will be 77. She insists on testifying again.
We women are not worthless. We make the world go round, and if you're being abused, then you must tell someone.
Why are you shopping like that?
She's cutting against the grain, given the number of people in Canada who report sexual assault remains dismally low. But, backed by her daughters, Isabel Raycroft is resolute. She will be silent no more.
Cheers,
Cheers, Mom.
it's an inside
Mom.
Love you.
Sisters.
Thank you very much, girls.
Cheers.
Duncan
Thanks for
McHugh,
everything.
CBC News, Ottawa.